being in a jet and having the power behind you and you feeling that power as you go down the runway is awesome.
Your adrenaline is up. You know that they're really shooting at you with real missiles and real bullets.
For the first time in almost 50 years, Canadian jet fighters play a major role in battle. Korea to Kosovo, next. Aviano, Italy. An Italian city in the shadow of the Dolomites. For 79 days, Aviano was the primary base for a massive NATO bombing campaign against Serbia. In the Kosovo crisis, for the first time in history, the conflict was decided by air power alone. An examination of Canada's role in the air offensive demonstrates how smaller nations can usefully function in a NATO military operation. Almost half a century after the first Canadian airmen flew jets in the Korean War, young Canadian F-18 pilots like Captain Mike Grover experienced the reality of combat, flying the 18 F-18 fighter bombers Canada placed under NATO command.
Got some there.
The first time you step up that ladder, tremendous anxiety. I guess you're thinking a lot about it. Like, no kidding, this is going to be the first time somebody really is going to be shooting back at you because you're dropping stuff on them, you know. What we're holding here right now in Aviano is a ground alert CAS. It's a ground alert close air support. We have the F-18 loaded up with bombs and air-to-air missiles. And if called upon, we scramble to the jets, start it up, and take off to use the bombs to assist the NATO troops.
6 Canadian F-18s remain in Aviano. Only one is on standby. But there is no let-up in training flights. Fighter pilots who don't constantly exercise their flying skills swiftly lose their edge.
Being in a jet and having the power behind you and you feeling that power as you go down the runway is awesome. It's a joy to fly. It's the capability from an air-to-ground, dropping bombs, air-to-air, and just the potential threat that you could face. It was willing to totally meet that capability.
Major Steve Will racked up 1,000 peacetime hours in F-18s, and like many of the NATO pilots, always wondered how he would stack up if it came to the real thing.
I'd have to admit I was curious to see how I would do when it really came down to flying combat missions, and getting out here, leading the new guys across the line basically and getting the job done was about the biggest challenge I've ever had in my life. I remember leading the 6 jets in from Germany. The first thing that struck my mind pitching out over the airfield was, my God, there are a whole lot of airplanes here. It was just packed with airplanes.
During the bombing campaign, up to 800 warplanes were based at Aviano.
The next 3 days were literally a blur. We were sat down, we were given our initial in-briefs, our theater briefs. I think I was doing my first mission 4 days after I was on the ground. I was flying my first combat mission. Honestly, if you would ask me 2 years ago if I'd ever thought that I'd really be in a combat scenario, I would have said probably not. If you look at it since, say, the Korean War, there haven't been any Canadian pilots that have been in combat. You're talking almost a good 40 years there. We just don't do it that often.
Although new to combat, and with only 18 Hornets in action at the height of the offensive, the Canadians flew 10% of NATO's strike missions. Next, going to war with the Balkan Rats.